email. It's all a thing. Hi everyone. Okay, so we're going to get started. I assume people will be coming in and out because that's just kind of how it is. First things first, I'm going to hand around a piece of paper, well, a couple of pieces of paper. If you could go ahead and put your information here. I send a follow-up email after this to give you kind of links to some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. So just fill this out. If you run out of pages, let me know. I put a couple here, but there's a lot of people. Okay, so you are in the last OPT workshop of the winter term. There will be at least 6 more in the spring term. And we're taping it to put it online so that people can watch it in their pajamas at 2 in the morning, which is why I'm wearing a microphone, even though typically I'm a very loud talker, so I usually don't need a microphone. So if things get kind of loud, let me know. I am Sarah Bonnell, an International Student and Scholar Advisor. I know some of you personally. I've been working with the Global Engagement Office here at Santa Clara since October of 2014, which feels like it was just a little while ago, but I guess it's been more than a year now. And before coming to Santa Clara as an advisor, I worked for 7 years as an immigration paralegal, filing work visas, green card applications, all the stuff that happens for people after they finish their F1. And so the first thing that Gary had me do with the F1 students was take over OPT advising. I am happy and excited to say that this is actually, and kind of sad actually a little bit, to say that this is going to be my last OPT workshop. Susan and Cora are going to be taking back over OPT advising so that I can focus on all of the brand new STEM regulations that you just heard about yesterday. So that's going to take a lot of work, so I'm going to concentrate on that while Susan and Cora take over the day-to-day OPT advising. So I guess you're in luck. You get my last workshop, which hopefully will be my best one yet. So today what we're going to be going ahead and doing is I'm going to take a quick census to get an idea of who's here so I can tailor some of my content to your specific needs. I'm going to give you an introduction to OPT, what it is, and how to apply for it. And then I'm going to leave plenty of times for Q&A, right? So I don't anticipate that we're going to take the entire duration of this. We build in time for questions. I prefer that you hold your questions to the end. There are a couple of very specific points where I will stop for questions because they're complicated subjects. But in general, leave them to the end because I might actually get to your question just in the course of the presentation. All right, so who in here is a graduate student? Who in here is an undergraduate student? I love you too. Okay, so who in here is in a STEM field? Science, technology, engineering, math. Who in here is not in a STEM field? Okay, great. And of the people not in STEM fields, who's law? Any other law? Okay. And MBA in the back, is that?
MSIS.
Okay. MSIS is a STEM field, technically. You're an MBA student. What about in the back row? What are you studying?
You are.
So you're undergraduate students. Okay, I didn't even see you back there. All right, great, excellent, excellent. So as is typical of our international student body at Santa Clara, the majority of the people here are graduate students, the majority of the people here are in STEM fields, but there are people here that are not graduate students and that are not in STEM field. OPT really doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're a grad or undergrad, it doesn't care if you're in a STEM field or not. The extension after OPT does, but we'll talk about that very briefly, particularly briefly today because I've got a bunch of town hall meetings coming up to talk about it in more depth. All right, excellent. So the first things first, and that is, what is OPT? OPT is an acronym for Optional Practical Training. It is both a benefit and a continuation of your F1 status. So a lot of people are like, oh, I graduated, I'm done with Santa Clara. That's not exactly true. You actually have to continue to interact with us because you continue to be on an F1 student visa in F1 status, right? So how you maintain status is a little bit different. You're not taking classes anymore, but you are still on an F1 sponsored by Santa Clara, so you're definitely still going to be interacting with our office. It's a derivative work benefit, right? So it's work authorization that is based on the completion of your academic program. The way, it's 12 months per degree level. So if you're at the master's level, you're going to get 12 months. If you're at the undergraduate level, you're going to get 12 months. If you come back and do another degree, like a PhD after your master's or a master's after your bachelor's degree, you can use it again, right? So it's per degree level, and each higher level you get another round of that 12 months. If you're in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math, that's going to be our engineering students, and then our MSIS students, and then people that are doing engineering or the sciences and arts and sciences at the undergraduate level. You get an additional extension beyond the 12 months, right? So everybody here gets 12 months, but STEM people get a little bit longer, and that's all crazy up in the air right now with the regulations. It's actually not up in the air, it's actually resolved. It's going to be 24 months. The way that you prove that you're allowed to work when you're in OPT status is by showing an employment authorization document. It's actually a card. That's what you're going to be applying for. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a second. This is quite different than CPT. How many people in here have done CPT, curricular practical training? So those people who have done CPT know the document you use to prove that you're allowed to work when you're on CPT, curricular practical training, is your I-20, right? Your I-20 is what you show and what says they're allowed to work with this company from this date to this date. OPT is different. What proves you're allowed to work is your card, and that is because it's a benefit of your status, and it's not necessarily tied to a specific employer. It's not a work visa. It's a benefit of your student status. It's not tied to a specific employer. The card is what proves you're allowed to work, and that's an important point that I'm going to come back to kind of time and time again. The government agency that you're going to be interacting with in order to secure this card, because I don't make them in my basement at night, they're like actual secure documents, is USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. How many people in here filed a change of status? Anyone? Yep. So change of status students already know this. Y'all have already had to interact with USCIS, and so to some extent, you're a little more prepared with what it's like to interact with a huge government bureaucracy and what it's like to mail government documents and money off and not hear anything for months at a time. Most people in this room have not interacted with USCIS to date. That's okay. I'm an expert at interacting with them, so I'll be here to help you, and so will Susan and Cora. I want to reiterate that it is not a work visa. You continue to be sponsored by Santa Clara, which means that you will continue to have to interact with me and Susan and Cora and Jenny and Gary for at least 12 months after you graduate, and in some cases up to 3 years after you graduate. So everyone's a Bronco after they graduate. International Broncos are especially Bronco for some time after they graduate because of, you know, continued reporting obligations, right? And then the main thing, and I kind of want to add another bullet point here, you don't, if you're applying for CPT, you actually need your job to apply, right? Because you put your job information on your I-20. You don't need a job to apply for OPT, right? You just need to apply for it. And then once you get your card, you can start working, right? The one thing you have to keep in mind when you're applying for jobs on OPT, the primary thing, is that the jobs that you're looking for need to be related to your degree. So I'm going to talk very briefly about this now, and then we can expand on it in the Q&A section later. Related to degree can be pretty obvious for some people, and it can be a little bit confusing for other people. So if you are in the School of Engineering and you're getting a degree in computer science and engineering, something that might be related to your degree is, I'm getting a computer engineering degree, I'm going to be a computer engineer. And a lot of people go ahead and do that. But it might not be as obvious to you that if you're getting a degree in computer science and engineering, you could, for example, go and teach children at a summer camp how to program computer applications. That is also related to your degree. And so it's important, if you are considering kind of careers that might not follow your exact path, to keep in mind various options. This is especially important to people that are not in direct nexus fields, right? Fields where computer engineering degrees lead to computer engineering jobs, but are instead in more liberal arts fields, or particularly for the 2 law school students here, not everybody who goes to law school goes and follows the traditional path of taking the bar and becoming an attorney. A lot of people that go to law school follow alternative paths, and it is possible to use your law-related OPT to do things other than being an attorney, which is especially important when you're waiting for bar results too, even if you do want to be an attorney. And so if anybody has questions about what it means to be related to your degree, I'm happy to answer some here. And then as you're looking for jobs, if you have questions, you can always consult with our office. We work closely with the various career management and the career centers on campus to try to help everyone get the information they need. So I'm not an expert about how to write a resume or use a LinkedIn account to find a job, but I do know what kinds of jobs you can and cannot accept as an international student. All right, moving right along. This is the card that I promised I would show you a picture of. So this is what an EAD card looks like. This is what it looks like to prove that you're allowed to work. It's not this big, it's about the size of a driver's license, and it will not have some random dude's picture. It'll be your picture and your biographical information on it. I want to point out 2 features that I'm going to come back to at another point in this presentation. The first one is that every card will have a start and an end date. This is going to be important. The second one is cards have a copy of your signature, it's actually a little bit raised, as a security feature. Those are 2 things that we're going to come back to later in the presentation today. All right, so a little information about who is eligible to apply for OPT, optional practical training. Anybody who is a graduating F1 student who's planning on seeking employment in their field of study. Pretty easy, definitely everyone in this room. You must have properly maintained your immigration status. By and large, if you're here in this room, you probably have properly maintained your immigration status. If we had concerns and thought that you had not maintained your immigration status, we definitely would be talking to you about it and telling you to go talk to an immigration lawyer. If you think that there may be issues with this, come and see us and we'll probably refer you to an immigration attorney. But most Santa Clara students maintain their immigration status. You need to have at least 3 consecutive quarters of full-time enrollment if you're in one of the quarter schools, which is everything but the law school. The law school requires 2 semesters. It's an academic year, basically, right? So 3 quarters or 2 semesters is 1 academic year of full-time enrollment. If you're a student who has changed status, and you changed your status late in your academic career, we may want to include some extra documents when we submit your application. You will talk to your advisor at the application appointment to go over that particular thing. And I can answer questions too. If you are planning to do CPT, Curricular Practical Training and Internship, in your final academic term, keep in mind that you cannot apply for OPT. I can't issue your OPT I-20 until I've done all your other stuff. So there is some logistical complexity to it, right? So if you have a reduced course load because you're not taking full units because you only have like 1 class left to graduate, and you want to do a CPT internship, and you want to apply for OPT nice and early so you can start working right after you graduate, you're going to have to be really on top of your paperwork. I'm happy to kind of go through that in a little more detail at the end in the Q&A section, but just keep in mind, I cannot process your OPT until your CPT appointment has been completed and you have your CPT I-20 in hand, because you're going to be mailing a copy of that I-20 to the government. All right, just a couple quick comments on delays and denials. This isn't meant to scare you, just to give you some information. Typically, USCIS, the government agency, is not going to just outright deny your application. Quite rare that they would do that. Usually what happens is they issue what's called a request for evidence, or an RFE, and they ask for what it is that they need. RFEs can be very simple things, like you didn't sign your form properly, you didn't submit good enough pictures, all the way to very complicated ones that are 10 pages long and ask for every single document about your whole life, including bank statements and lease agreements and blah, blah, blah. Santa Clara students by and large, do not receive a high yield of requests for evidence. Students that go to fraud schools get really, really high RFE ratios, right? They get like 50, 60, 70, 80% of their students will get RFEs, even if the student themselves hasn't done anything wrong, because the school is under suspicion. Santa Clara is a legitimate school. We help our students maintain status. We follow the law here. So typically the RFEs that I do see are people that just didn't follow my instructions and got their photos at the wrong location and need to submit new photos. I'm going to talk about it in more detail. The whole point of this workshop, the whole point of your OPT appointment is to try to make it so that you don't get an RFE on accident for something that you could address ahead of time, right? The reasons that we see people get RFEs, other than the photos and the signatures that I previously mentioned, are CPT utilization. If a student has used CPT too often, if they delay their application really a lot by doing CPT in their final term and not being on top of the logistical process, if they've done more than 12 months of full-time CPT, which is literally nobody in this room could possibly have done that, because only PhD students at Santa Clara could even do that much full-time CPT, or if they have failed to maintain their status by working outside of the hours that have been allotted, all of those things could draw requests for evidence. If you've done OPT at the same degree level, so remember I said 12 months per higher degree level. If you're getting a second master's degree, and you already did OPT at the master's level, you are most likely not eligible for OPT. Kind of hold the questions to the end.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you have that situation, we need to talk personally about it. If you have in any way failed to maintain your immigration status, if you've spent tons of time outside of the country during an academic term, if you've had a bunch of reduced course loads, if you have any kind of irregularity in your CVIS record, that could lead to the government submitting a request for evidence and having you submit documents to prove that you maintained your status. In any case, the number one reason that cases get denied are typos and government errors. The number one reason. Oh, and that reminds me, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to send everyone a PDF of this, so there's no need to take pictures. So the number one reason is government errors, right? The number one thing that I see delay cases is the government makes a typo, which is super annoying and frustrating. I'm going to stop here and say my number one rule about OPT. You don't remember anything but this. Remember this. Do not, ever, under any circumstances, contact the government directly. So I am an expert. I have spent my entire working life interacting with crazy, bureaucratic, inefficient U.S. government agencies. I really like it. I'm quite good at it. Cor and Susan are also quite good at it. I'm not sure that they like it quite as much as I do because I'm kind of a weirdo, but nevertheless, I know how to get things done with the government. When you get your receipt notice, it's going to say on it in kind of fine print, if you see a typo, call 1-800, we don't pick up our phone. And you'll call 1-800, we don't pick up our phone, and they won't pick up their phone. And then they'll eventually pick up their phone, and they'll basically take a message that'll, kind of get forwarded to the agency that has your case, because the person you're talking to is in Nebraska, and your case is in Virginia, and it was previously in, Arizona. They have no idea what's going on. I, on the other hand, have a direct email address for an actual human being that can touch your case if need be. So it's much faster for me to get things corrected than for you to try to get them corrected. If you find a typo, if you find an error, if you have a question, always contact us first. Do not contact the government unless we specifically ask you to do so. It will only delay your case further. Okay. Moving right along. So this slide is going to be the most important slide. This is the one that's going to answer everyone's big questions. I'm going to go through it slowly. I do have a tendency to talk very fast, so I'm going to try to go even slower than I usually do. And then I'm going to pause after this for questions about this particular slide. Okay, give me a second to take a drink of water. Which I feel is particularly gross to do when I'm wearing a microphone. All right. So, thing about OPT timing. When should I file? How long is it going to take? It all has to do with your program end date. The program end date is actually listed on your I-20. But for most people, the program end date listed on your I-20 is not going to be true to when you're actually graduating. It might be, 6 months, a term, a year, sometimes even in advance of when you actually graduate. So what we end up doing is we end up shortening your program end date to match your graduation date in most cases. So if you are graduating in winter term, your program end date is probably going to be March 18th, which is the last day of finals for the winter term. If you're graduating in the spring term, your program end date is probably going to be June 9th, which is the last day of finals for the spring term. If you're in the law school, I think it's May 13th is the last day of finals. What was that?
21st.
21st, May 21st is the last day of finals. Thank you. And so everybody has the program end date that kind of correlates with their academic term. For the most part, there are occasional deviations for people that have like a big presentation that's due someday after finals, but almost everybody is going to be the last day of finals. The program end date determines everything else. So in your mind, think about what your program end date might be, and then we're going to take these general rules I'm going to put up and apply them to your unique situation. Based on your program end date, you can determine the correct filing period, which is literally when do I mail my application? When should I put my application in the mail? You can determine the correct start date. When can I start working? When should I start my job? When can I tell Google that they can send me that check for $1 million to start working for them? We should also keep in mind the processing timeline, which is how long it takes the government to approve your case once it has been mailed to them, as well as the unemployment clock, which is once your card is valid, how long do you have until you have to leave? How long do you have to find a job, right? So all of this stuff is general rules that you're going to apply to yourself. The processing time is 3 to 4 months. So once you mail your application, it'll take about 3 months for them to approve it. This varies pretty wildly throughout the year. So if you're applying in, the spring term, the processing times the winter term, the processing times are usually pretty fast because not a lot of people are applying for OPT. If you're applying in June, everyone is applying for OPT, right? It's not just Santa Clara that's graduating in June and May. It's every single university in the entire country, and they're all applying, plus all of their STEM graduates are applying for extensions based on the OPT that they applied last year. You get the idea, right? So the more people applying, the slower it takes. So sometimes we see them approved, boom, really fast, like 2 months. Sometimes we see them take a little bit longer. So 3 months is about what you should expect, and that's actually what they're allowed to take by law. 3 months is the processing time. 90 days, about 3 months, is the unemployment clock. Once you get your card and it is valid, you have 90 days to find a job. All right, when should you file your application? You may mail your application to the government up to 90 days before your program end date. Graduating in June, that means you can mail your application in March. Graduating in March, that means you can mail your application in January. Graduating in August, you can do it in May, etc., etc., etc. You can also, I hesitate to say this, file after your program completion, after your graduation. Now here's the thing, y'all. I'm gonna put this little bad boy up here. I really don't like people doing this, and here's why. One, this just became allowed again for the first time. So for a while, this red X was like just there, that was just stable. It wasn't like flickering around. It was like absolutely not, under no circumstances, it's not legally stable. It is legally stable again, but realistically, I would not like you to apply when you're in that grace period. I want you to apply before you complete your program. Very, very few people have a reason to wait until very close to graduation. Most of you can prep this stuff pretty early. If you think that you're not sure when you're going to complete your degree for whatever reason, have GPA, or you're not sure if you're going to pass a class, you need to be interacting with an advisor early on about that. I don't want to have to hunt you down at graduation and like make you sign your forms as you're walking across the stage in front of your family and friends. Please just apply early before your graduation date. All right, with regards to your start date, you may request a start date that is exactly 1 day after your program end date. your program ends on June 9th, you can ask for June 10th. I'm not sure why you'd ask for June 10th, because you're going to be like hanging out and graduating in some cases, but if you really want to, you can ask for June 10th. You can also pick a later start date. You can delay your start date up to 60 days after your program end date. What are some reasons why a person might want to delay their start date? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah?
Because you want to take a vacation?
Yeah, Alex says it, and that is because you might want to take a vacation after graduation. You might be taking the bar after graduation. You might need some extra time to find a job. There's tons of reasons why a person might want to delay their start date and not start working, boom, right after they graduate. Take a deep breath, have a little work-life balance. There's plenty of time to get into the rat race. So there's lots of reasons to delay the start date. Some people choose a start date that's early on. What's really important is that you choose a start date that's actually reasonable for you. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this. If you know that you're graduating in June, and you know that from the day you mail your application, it's going to take the government about 3 months to approve your case, and you know that you can't start working until your case is approved and you've got your card in your hand and it's valid. What's a reasonable start date to pick if you are not mailing your application until, say, May, a month before you graduate? Is it reasonable to pick June as your start date if you're graduating in June and you are filing in May? No, it's not, because you're not going to have your card by June. So what's the point of picking a June start date, right? Because you can't start working until you have your card and it's valid. So if you don't pick a reasonable start date that takes into consideration your career goals, your program end date, and the processing timeline, you will not have a great time communicating with employers about what your possible start date is. And it's really important to note this for a couple of reasons. So right now I'm talking about it as if it's just kind of a casual thing, like, oh, it's no big deal. You know, you just won't have your card in June when you want to start working. That is hard to communicate with employers, right? Because employers want to know, look, when can you start working? Like, they don't really care what the answer is, they just need to know when. It's actually more serious than that, and here's why. The government will issue you a card. Remember, we talked about this. Cards have start dates and they have end dates, right? You're requesting a start date, and your requested start date will help the government determine your requested end date. So if you're picking June 10th as your start date, your end date in most cases will be 365 days later, June 9th of the following year, right? But here's the thing, if you ask for June 10th, but you don't mail your application off until May, you're not going to get your card by June 10th, right? Everybody knows that. That's pretty obvious. What's not so obvious is this. When they issue your card, the start date on your card will not be June 10th. It will be whatever day it was that they approved your case. They don't backdate the start date on your card. The reason for this is your unemployment time starts based on the start date on your card. So you wouldn't want them to backdate the start date in actuality, because then you would have a card that says you were allowed to start working in June when you didn't even get your card until August, which means you've used up 2 months of your unemployment when you weren't even allowed to work to begin with. That's why they don't backdate the start dates of the cards. But an important thing to note here, and this is particularly important for people who are not in STEM fields. While they do not backdate your start date, so your start date in the example I'm giving might be, say, August 10th. You apply May 10th, it gets approved August 10th. You asked for June 10th, but the start date will be August 10th, because that's when they approved your card. The end date does not necessarily get adjusted in a similar forward fashion. So your end date may end up being June 9th, even though your start date is August 10th, which means your card is valid for less than 1 year. Now the STEM people are like, ha, 2 months, what, who cares? I have 3 years, it's not gonna be a big deal for me. But if you're not in a STEM field and you only have 12 months of OPT to pursue what your academic and professional goals are, 2 months is a really, really big deal. So it's important that we pick reasonable start dates so that we don't short our cards inadvertently. And it's particularly important for the non-STEM fields because their cards are 12 months and that's it. Okay, so that's my spiel about this. This is complicated. I talk really fast. Think about your situation. Who has questions about this particular thing? Not just in general, but about when should I file, when can I start, unemployment time, when does that start taking? Questions about this? Yes,
Does
please.
the card processing depend upon the start date? For example, 2 guys have applied at the same time and one of them has given a start date as June 10th while I have given it as July 10th. So, does it depend on whose card will get processed first?
Yes, absolutely. That's an excellent question because it addresses a pervasive rumor among students that your start date has anything to do with when they look at your case. That is not true, right? So here's what happens. You mail your case off, it goes through kind of a review process, they give you a receipt, they palletize it, they send it to a service center where there's all these adjudicators approving cases and denying cases, and then it gets unloaded into a filing cabinet, and it literally just sits there. It sits there with all the cases from the Santa Clara grads, the Cal Berkeley grads, the Stanford grads, everybody else, all the other universities. So everybody's cases are sitting in these filing cabinets. And when the adjudicators, the officers of the immigration of USCIS are ready, they go and they pick up, a bunch of them off of the shelf, and they put them on their desk, and they approve them, and they approve them. I mean, they actually look at them first, but you get the idea. And so, no, they don't even look at your start date until they pull your case from the filing cabinet and go to approve your case. And so this is a rumor that like, oh, if you ask for an earlier start date, even if it's unreasonable, they might approve your case faster. False. Indeed, they do not. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Yes.
So the unemployment clock, does it start after the program end date or the EAD start date?
The unemployment start will be based on the EAD card start date. Now, if you pick a reasonable start date, you can know what day that'll be, right? Because you'll know what day your card will be approved. But if you don't pick a reasonable start date, you might not necessarily know when your unemployment will start until you get your card in your hand. But once you get your card in your hand, that date is the date that you use to calculate your unemployment time. Yeah?
Quick question. So is it 12 months overall, or is it 12 months of employment plus the 90 days of unemployment?
The 90 days is inside of the 12 months, so it's only 12 months period. You don't get to tack unemployment anywhere. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
And you can travel only once you receive your EAD card, right? Outside.
I'll talk about travel separately. Yep. Let me know if you come back. Yeah.
So once you apply, right, would you get an acknowledgement as to when you're going to get the start date, or you wouldn't know anything until the processing is done?
You do get an acknowledgement once you apply, but it won't say anything about your start date. And so for the most part, you won't know until your processing is done and your card's in your hand.
So that's if it's going to take 3 months, I wouldn't know until 3 months when my start date is actually going to be.
Yeah, exactly. But you can have a good idea, right? If you want to start in June, mail your application in March so that you give yourself the best possible opportunity for a reasonable start date, right? So you have a little bit of control over it, which is frankly more control than most government interactions allow, but not 100% control. Yeah, in the back?
I don't this like if I choose the start date in middle of June, but my case is only approved after that. So and my employer still allows that since they
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very end of that.
So is there any issue with USCIS if I choose a start date like June 15th, but my case is only approved after that?
So in the example that you're giving, you choose June 15th as your start date, but your case isn't approved until July 15th, and then you get your card and it says July 15th on it. That is what it is. You can't start working until you have your card in hand and it has a valid start date on it. So once you get your card and it has a valid start date, you can start working.
So
That
in short, they will choose the start start date, they will define the start date in the card.
I'm sorry, I have bad hearing. You have to speak up a little.
Sorry, so USCIS will choose the start date for us?
So USCIS will give you the start date that you ask for unless they are approving your case after that day, in which case they will give you a start date that matches the day they approve your case. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Additional? Yeah.
If you don't have a clear date when you are going to start,
Yeah.
like which is the best date you can choose, like 60 days?
Yeah.
or
So the
3
question is,
days?
if you don't have a specific start date in mind, like you don't have a company lined up or whatever, how do you pick the appropriate date for your situation? And that is, you look at your situation. So everybody's going to be in a different situation, right? Law school graduates have different goals and have different employment opportunities available to them than, like, say, computer engineers, then do art studio majors. So everybody has to look at their unique situation. When are you applying? What kinds of jobs are you looking for? How much experience do you have? What's the likelihood of you finding a job? If you're really worried about finding a job and you don't think that you're going to find one, or you know that you're really, really picky, and even if Google offers you a job, you're like, nope, I'm working for Apple and that's the end of it, then you might want to pick a late start date to give yourself even more time to find a job. But if you have a job lined up, or you have been interviewing and you've had like 5 interviews in the last week or whatever, your resume gets a lot of bite, then you might want to pick an earlier start date. If you're really concerned, you can leave the start dates portion of the degree completion form blank and talk about it with your advisor. But we just don't want to have like a long, drawn out, like 30-minute conversation that's like, should I pick June 15th or should I pick June 16th? Should I pick June 15th or June 16th, right? So we want you to have some kind of an idea when you come in. And then, like, if you have specific questions about specific goals, we can address them. Okay, any more questions about this particular thing? When should I file? How long does it take? How is unemployment calculated? Yes?
So this is a twofold question actually. The offer letters generally have the tentative joining dates. So does it mean that by filing for OPT, we need to have our start dates mentioned exactly the same, or can we do it afterwards also?
No, you just pick start dates that work for you. So if you have a job that you're going to do lined up, people that are leaving, did you put your name on the list before you left? Okay, thank you. So if you have a job, you can put the start dates that you want on the application, or you can pick other start dates. It's at your discretion.
So, USCIS people would not be looking at the start dates of the on the offer letter, right?
You don't submit an offer letter because remember, you don't need a job to apply for OPT. You're applying for work, like kind of blanket work authorization, not for work authorization with a specific company. Okay, additional questions on this subject? You had a question? Did you have a question? Behind you.
Oh,
Did you have a question?
no, it's okay.
Okay, good. I'm going to move on from this. We can circle back to this at the end. There'll be plenty of time. Don't worry about it. All right, so this is the second slide that everybody wants to see. Remember, I'm going to send you PDFs afterwards. I'm also going to send you an email that has links to several of the things that are referred to on this slide. So how do you apply for OPT? Like, okay, great, I get it. How do I get that card? Because I need to start working. First of all, OPT is done by appointment only. We do not do OPT during drop-in advising hours, and we also do not do OPT kind of like at random. We have specific slotted out time for OPT appointments. They are 20-minute appointment slots, and they are made by appointment. We actually have a really, really cool, awesome, amazing electronic OPT appointment calendar where you can select an appointment that works for you based on our availability. You'll get access to that calendar when I send you an email after today, actually. My one thing about the calendar is, well, there's a couple things about it. Number one, all appointments are Pacific Standard Time. Make sure that your calendar is Pacific Standard Time, because if it's in, say, for example, time of another country, you might show up at 2 in the morning, and trust me, we are not doing OPT appointments at 2 in the morning. Additionally, please only select one appointment. Do not abuse the system and take appointment slots away from other people. There are plenty of appointment slots for everyone, but we have a very, very, very high volume of OPT applicants in the spring term. And if you take multiple appointment slots, ooh-wee, I'm going to be mad about it, because we're trying to give everybody the ability to use this system and not have to like talk to multiple people on the phone in order to get appointments. We want it to work for everyone, but if anybody abuses it, it's going to make it harder for us to keep the system. And those are my two things about appointments. They're done by appointment. OPT appointment. Do not just drop in and think you're going to get your OPT. Okay, moving right along. OPT is an application that you make to the U.S. government. We process the application, we review it, and we give you a brand new I-20 with a recommendation for OPT in your appointment. So, in order to prep for your appointment, you need a degree completion form. The degree completion form is signed by your advisor. If you are in graduate engineering, you have a specific academic advisor. If you are in graduate business, you will use the graduate business program. Gianna, Rainey, Alex, Paul, and that's who's going to be signing your degree completion form. If you are an undergraduate student, you will work with the Drummond Advising Center. If you are a law school student, you will work with your registrar's office. I've seen Maher sign, and I think a couple of other people. If you have questions, let me know, and I'll figure out for you. All right, the degree completion form is two things. It's your information up at the top, and then it's a certification by your advisor that you actually are ready to complete your degree. Here's the sitch, y'all. Advisors are supposed, before they sign the form, they are supposed to look at a variety of things. Number one, that you have submitted a petition to graduate to the university. Number two, that you actually are ready to graduate, that you meet the GPA requirements, that you've taken all of your specific major, minor, core, elective, unit total, blah, blah, blah. There are hundreds of degree programs at Santa Clara. I literally have no idea what the minimum GPA to get an econ degree is, nor do I know how many units it's required to get an LLM or a concentration in data analytics and MSIS. Your person who signs that form is who knows that, and that's what they're signing, right? But different advisors handle that responsibility differently. Some of them take it super seriously, right? And some of them just sign the form. You yourselves need to be advocates for your situation and make sure 100% that you are going to complete your degree. Every single term, we have somebody that applies for OPT, and then lo and behold, all of a sudden, it turns out that they got a D+ in a class early on and they need that for graduation, or that they missed an elective and they have to take another class. Super disruptive. So please make sure that you actually are going to be ready to complete your degree in the term that you're signing for, because it's going to be a problem if not. All right, the degree completion form. I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of it, just real quick. This is what it looks like. It's on our website. Like I said, the first part of it is filled out by you. The second part of it is filled out by your advisor. Hey, look, right here. That's where the program end date goes. So remember I said everybody has that program end date. That's what's really important. That's where it goes on the form. The advisor fills it out. So this is what it looks like. I'm also going to send you a link to this form today. If you're leaving, put your name on the list or else you're not going to get my email. All right, thanks guys. Okay, so degree completion form, and then your application to the government, right? So you make an appointment, I keep your degree completion form, I review your application to the government, which includes a cover letter. I'm going to be sending you a template, a check made out to Sarah Elizabeth Bonnell. No, just kidding, obviously don't make that to me, because I don't make the cards in my basement at night, which we already talked about. It's made out to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. We will soon have a sample check on our website. If you don't know how to fill out a check, it's okay, bring a blank one to your appointment, we'll help you fill it out. People just don't write checks anymore, you know? It used to be that people wrote checks all the time. I don't even know where my checkbook is. Passport photos, a note about passport photos. Please, for the love of all that is good, do not get your passport photos at Walgreens, CVS, Costco, or any other location where a 14-year-old with a point-and-click digital camera says, hey bro, stand up against that white wall, and then print your picture out on a printer sitting on a counter somewhere. not going to be a good photo. Trust me, I've been doing this for a very long time. I can tell instantaneously when I look at photos if you went to one of those locations. Instead, I recommend that you go to one of the locations that is going to be listed on our website soon and that will be in the email I send you today. Go to J Photo. He loves Santa Clara students, takes really, really good photos. He's an actual photographer that has an actual studio. He takes good photos too. They look not only like government specification wise, but like just in general, people look pretty good in their photos, which is pretty rare for a passport photo, let's be honest. Most people look like criminals. Okay, yeah, see, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Except for French people. French people always look like models in their passport photos. And people like to go to J Photo as well. Okay, so the most important element is going to be the government form, Form I765. I'm going to go into extreme detail about this in a moment. I will give you a brand new I-20, not at your appointment. It'll be available the day after your appointment in most cases, sometimes 2 days after your appointment, but it'll have the OPT recommendation on it. Did you sign your name on the thing?
I'm finding the page.
Okay, it's at the front. I'll give you your new I-20 at the appointment, and then you will come to your appointment with everything packaged up, including copies of your supporting documents. Copies of your supporting documents. I'm definitely not above making copies by any means. That's kind of what you do when you work in immigration, but I'm not a secretary and I don't have time to make copies for 300 students. You need to make copies of your own supporting documents and come with your copies made. Little pro tip about copies, no staples, single-sided, 8.5 by 11 American Standard paper. No staples, single-sided, 8.5 by 11. Everybody hates staples. It seems so organized, but the government puts it through a scanner, so they really don't like staples. I'd spend half of my time taking staples out of things, yeah.
How many copies?
Just one. Just one for the one that gets mailed off to the government. Okay, so yeah. So that's how to apply for OPT. Yeah. Let's hang on just a second. So next up I'm going to talk about how to fill out the I-765 form. I'm going to send everyone this list and a template cover letter that serves as a checklist and a list of where to get your photos taken and a copy of this presentation. Do you have something that has to be answered at this exact point? Okay.
All pages of the passport or only those pages which have data or something?
Biodata page, US visa pages.
Okay.
And I'm confused. Do we need to make 2 appointments or 1 appointment?
One appointment.
Then the new identity will be issued at the appointment, right?
Yeah, it's actually, I don't know why it says issued at your appointment. That this is like an old version of this thing for some reason. It's issued we prepare it at your appointment, but we can't download it and print it until the next day. So it's usually it's ready to pick up the day after your appointment. So you have 1 appointment, but the I-20 is ready to pick up usually the next day. And I'm glad that you pointed that out because we changed this in this actual presentation, so I don't know where this one
And then we have to mail it to USCIS.
Yes, you do. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And the photograph dimensions are specific?
They are very, very specific, yeah, which is another reason why you go to a legitimate photographer that actually knows. So basically, when I started working here, everybody that was coming to my office had Costco photos, and I was like, these are horrific. They are the most awful photos, and they're not even actually square. They're cut all wonky. So I called every single person that says that they do passport photos in Santa Clara City and asked them super sneaky questions about whether they actually know what passport photo specifications are. And there were 3 people that did, and none of them were Costco. And so that's who the list is. One of those locations has closed, so there's 2 people on the list that actually know what they're talking about when it comes to US passport photos, which are quite different, right? Canadian visa photos, Indian visa photos, Chinese visa photos. Every country has its own different little tiny photo specifications. The US ones are really specific, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on from here. We can circle back again. Once you have the new I-20, go package everything up and mail it off to the government. I recommend that you use a courier service. In particular, I recommend FedEx. I used to joke that I say FedEx so often that I should be paid by FedEx for the number of times I say FedEx because I do such a good job of branding for their company. I'll actually give you a FedEx envelope at your appointment. And that's just that they have like good service. You get a tracking number with that, with the package, and they have a good relationship with the government agencies, and so they're not going to lose things. And you don't have to wait in line at the post office, which is always a plus. All right, so I'm trying to figure out a way to show people this, but I feel like it's quite hard to read this. I'm going to send you this so you can see it. And this is one that's totally filled out. There's a couple little things, little tricks that I want to show people right now. So I'm going to just go ahead and pull open an I765 and do it. All right, so this is the I765 form I'm going to be sending you a link to. It's a PDF of a government form. You need to type it, first of all, because it's a human being reading your answers and typing them into a system to create a profile and a receipt notice. They already make typos enough as it is. They don't need to be trying to read your handwriting, which a lot of you have very nice handwriting, but it really doesn't matter because they're human beings, and let's give them as few chances as possible to make mistakes. So a couple of little pro tips, and again, I'm sending you the presentation that has the sample in it, but just some kind of pro tips. So first of all, check the box. The name one is the one that kills everyone. Here's the stitch with the name. This should be 3 fields, right? Your last name, your first name, and if you have one, your middle name. It is unfortunately not. It is 1 field, lazy government programming. So you actually have to make it 3 fields, and I'll show you how. So my last name is Bonnell, B-O-N-N-E-L. That's in all caps. You have to actually go, you hear that, right? You hear me put those spaces in there? You've got to actually put those spaces in there. And that's so that they understand which is your first name and which is your last name. You would think they have my passport. How can they not figure it out? But trust me, if they can mix your names up, they will mix your names up. And so you want to make sure that where your names are, you put everything in there. That's right, my middle name is Elizabeth. And if you have multiple names, or if your name is quite long and it doesn't fit in the box properly, we'll work together on it. There actually are character limitations in the I765 form. So if you have a lot of names, we might need to work together to make sure that they don't butcher it so that your first name is listed as Sar instead of Sarah. So if you have questions about that, talk to the advisor in your appointment. And I'm trying to think of other ones. For most people, you're going to want to put your place of entry like this. It's not, you might, if you entered in San Jose, obviously put San Jose, not San Francisco or Los Angeles or whatever, but it's going to be city, state. And then if you entered the country as an F1 student, you'll do F1 student, like that. Maybe you entered as an H4 spouse, like that. But write it out like this, right? Like capital F-1 space parentheses student and parentheses. It's a formal thing, and the idea is this: just write it the way that they're used to seeing it, because then they'll be less likely to make mistakes. Under number 16, eligibility category, everyone in here is applying for OPT, and the answer is C3B. C like cat, 3 the number, B like boy. That's a pro tip that just saved you from having to read a 36-page PDF. You are welcome. Yep. And then if things don't apply to you, like number 17 is not going to apply to you right now, you can go ahead and put NA. Not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. I don't know, the social security is like 123-45-6789. You put the dashes in, just write things in a formal way. Don't use all caps or whatever. These aren't things that are going to get your case denied, right? If you don't put the dashes in, they're not going to be like, denial! But it just makes it easier for them to read it and less likely to make a typo that's going to affect your life in general. Back to the presentation, like I said, I am giving you a PDF of this so you'll be able to look at some stuff. Here's the stitch. Remember that picture of that card that I showed you earlier? And I was like, remember 2 things about this card. It has a start and an end date, and what was the last thing I said?
Signature.
Boom. If I had a gold star, I'd be giving it to you. So here's the thing about the signature. Where do they get your signature from? Hello. They get it from your I-765 form, right? So If they can't get a clear signature from your form, they're going to need to get a new one from you, which means they're going to issue a request for evidence and make you sign in a box. Literally, they give you a piece of paper that has a box in it, and they say sign in the box, and then you're going to get really nervous because your signature is going to touch the box accidentally. What are you going to do? You're going to sign it right to begin with, and not delay your application. Here is the form. I blacked it out. Do not sign below the line. Do not sign into the words, because if they can't, again, if they can't take a clear picture of your signature, you're going to get a request for evidence. If you're nervous, just don't sign your form, and we'll sign it together at your appointment. That's fine too. Okay, so here's some stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna move on from here. So after your appointment, I'm like so annoyed because I totally updated this presentation and I'm not using the updated one. After your appointment, you're gonna get an email from us that says, your I-20's ready, come and get it. And you're gonna come get your I-20 and it's gonna have a slip on it that's gonna have very, very detailed instructions. And it's gonna say, there are 2 I-20s here, they are identical. Read everything to make sure there's no errors, and then sign them, and then date them, and then keep one to put with all of your other I-20s, and put the other one in your application to mail off to the government, and mail your stuff off to the government. If you feel like you need us to look at it again, or if we tell you that we need to look at it again before you mail it, you will come and see us at a specific time. Otherwise, you'll just pick up your I-20s, sign them, and mail it off. It's kind of freeing. Feels pretty good. You need to mail it within 30 days of our I-20 issuance. In fact, you need it to be on file within 30 days. So don't dilly-dally. Come and get your I-20s and get it off. You don't want to think about it anyway, right? You're going to be focusing on finals or classes starting or something, who knows what. You need to just get it done with, right? I recommend FedEx. Because this is a continuation of your F1 status, you're allowed to stay in the country while your case is pending. So a lot of people are like, but I asked for a start date that is 2 months after my program end date. That's okay. You're allowed to stay while it's pending. This is a continuation of your status. So that's not a problem. You can't work, though, until you have your card in your hand and it's valid, right? So you can stay while it's pending, you just can't work. Somebody asked about travel earlier. We strongly recommend that you not leave the country until you have your card in hand. We don't just strongly recommend it. The government strongly recommends that you not leave the country. In fact, they literally say strongly in their FAQ about this. And the reason is this: if you're outside of the country while your case gets approved, they're going to be expecting that you have your card in your hand to get back in the country. But how are you going to get your card that's mailed to your house in Santa Clara if you are outside of the country at your best friend's wedding? I'm not quite sure. Also, if you do get your photos at Costco, say, and they need to issue a request for evidence and they need new photos, how are you going to take new U.S. passport photos from outside of the country and respond to the request for evidence, right? So the point is this: things happen on your case periodically and you need to be around to interact with those things. Request for evidence, approval of your case. You can't do that from outside of the country. So it is risky to travel, and it's especially risky during certain times. If you have to travel, you really can't wait, let's talk. But please, you can just delay your vacation by like 1 week. It's not that big of a deal. Apply it early and then you won't have to worry about it, because you're definitely not traveling in the middle of an academic term, because that would be problematic. We've talked about this once, we're going to talk about it again. Do not ever, under any circumstances, contact the government directly. We all know why, because you're just going to mess your case up. But I can help you fix it, so just come to us if there's an error, if there's a typo, if you think it's taking too long, if you haven't gotten a receipt notice, just shoot us an email, ISS@SCU, and we'll respond, we'll let you know if it's weird or not. You'll get a receipt notice usually within 7 to 10 days. Check for typos right then and there, Because if there's a typo in your name, it's probably going to be on the receipt notice. And it's much easier for me to fix it at the receipt notice phase than it is for me to try to fix it when it's on your card, which is going to take forever, and we have to mail the card back. And so let's find them early, get them early, and you're going to contact me. You're not going to follow the instructions on the form that say call us at 1-800 we don't pick up our phone. You're going to call me. You're going to email. I don't pick up my phone. You'll get an approval within about 3 to 4 months. Here's what happens. People get their receipt notice. It has a specific receipt number. They can use that receipt number to track their case online. It's amazing. You can be so informed about what's going on with your case. It's great. The problem is this. People start getting a little obsessive, right? The first month, maybe you're checking it like, once a week. The second month, you're checking it once a day. 2.5 months in, you're checking it every hour on the hour. Where's my card? Where's my card? Why is it still pending? Why is it still pending? And then we start getting emails that are like, my case has been pending for exactly 66 days. What's going on? I haven't heard anything. Why is it not working? It's very normal. People who have filed with USCIS, change status people, y'all already know this. You're not going to hear anything, right? It's just going to be radio silence. You're going to get a receipt notice and then boom, nothing for about 3 months. And then it's going to be like, bam, bam, approval notice, card in the mail. It's going to be great. But if you feel like your case is taking too long, right? If you're outside of the normal processing time, which is about 90 days, shoot us an email and we can check in on the status of your case. I'm not going to check in on the 91st day and be like, the law says you have 91 days to approve this case. Why have you not approved this case? But I will, I'll contact the government and see what's going on, and I can also tell you what's normal, right? So once you get your approval notice in your card, you're going to again check for typos, because there's information on the card that's not on the receipt notice. The receipt notice is just like your name. The card has like your date of birth, it has validity dates. You gotta look at all that stuff and make sure that everything looks good. If there's typos or errors, please contact us. Even if things just kind of look weird to you and you're like, this start date doesn't make any sense. Why did I get this start date? Just contact us and we'll let you know if it's reasonable or not. But don't contact the government, of course. Okay, once you get your card, I keep like reiterating this check for typos thing because literally that's the #1 thing that happens. Like it happens, right? It's a government. They're processing tens of thousands of these. There's gonna be typos. It happens. I always say this, benefit from our expertise while you can. So a lot of people are like super stoked to graduate and like be done. They're like, deuces, bye Santa Clara. But here's the thing, out in the real world, you have to pay immigration attorneys tons of money to consult with them on immigration matters. If you're on a work visa, you don't have anybody to help you maintain your status, right? But here, you have us, we love you. You're in the bosom of Santa Clara University. We love all Broncos, but we in our office especially love global Broncos. And we're here to answer questions about things, right? If you have questions about, why is it taking so long for my card to be approved? But if you also have questions about like, I don't understand why I'm not getting any responses to my resume. I'm not going to look at your resume, but I am going to say like, have you visited the career center? Let's talk about other options. Are you applying for part-time jobs? Are you applying for contract jobs? Like, there are things that we know that you might not necessarily know, and I can't put everything in your head in this like little hour-long workshop. So just continue to interact with our office for sure. Even if you don't want to interact with our office, you actually have to. So you're going to be required to report information to us. You need to report changes to your U.S. address to our office via eCampus, and we have a web portal that you will use to update us whenever you start a job, end a job, take a new job, take a second job. All of that needs to be reported to our office. We have a website. Once your card is in your hand, you'll know your start date. Your start date is when you start your unemployment calculation. It's 90 days aggregate. So if you if you ask for June 10th and you start your job on June 20th, you have used up 10 of your 90 days of unemployment. You have 80 days left. Does that make sense? Travel, I always say travel is possible, but it's complex. It's not that you can't travel, it's just that whether or not you travel is a very personal calculation, right? Because in this room, some of you have F1 visa stamps that are valid, some of you have F1 visa stamps that are expired, and some of you have never had an F1 visa stamp. Some of you will have your card in your hand, some of you will not have your card in your hand, some of you will have jobs, some of you will not have jobs, some of you will have reported, some of you will not have reported your jobs. All of that stuff goes into whether or not it's safe or acceptable to travel. If you have questions, let us know. But do not contact me on a Friday when you're planning to leave on Saturday, because I might need to create a new I-20 for you that lists your employer's name. I might need to get you a travel signature, and sometimes I take Friday off and have a 3-day weekend, you know, just hanging out at home and watching Netflix. So I might not be available to help you immediately. You need to give us time to help you effectively, and that means contacting us several weeks before you plan to leave the country. I'm not going to go into tons of STEM stuff, but there's a bunch going on with STEM right now. You all got the email last night. Come to one of my town hall meetings, our town hall meetings, and we'll talk in extreme detail about how this affects anyone. The good news is STEM is 24 months for people who qualify, and that's the good news. Oh, and I always like to just put this little earwig in the last second. Think critically about H-1B sponsorship. It's not that you shouldn't have an H-1B filed on your behalf, it's that you should understand what an H-1B is, and that is it's a work visa. Quite different than a student visa, ties you to one employer, makes it quite hard for you to move to different jobs. Did you sign your name? Good. And so just think critically before you accept an H-1B. I think that's everything. I talked a little longer than I usually do. Go ahead. Boom. Questions? Yes.
On the card, it was written that it's not valid for re-entry to the US.
Correct, and that is because certain types of EAD cards are tied with what's called an advance parole, which is a travel document. Work cards, EAD cards for students, are not tied with travel documents. You still have to have your visa stamped, and so it's just separating that out for border officers to understand who you are. Yes?
So we have 16 days grace period for the OPT, right? Between the program and OPT. So we have another 60 days grace period after the OPT?
Yes, in the case where you choose to delay your OPT start date by 60 days, your OPT starts 60 days after your program end date, you do get 60 days after your OPT end date as well. During that grace period, it's actually called the departure period. You are not allowed to be working, of course. Yeah. Yes?
Could you go to the degree completion form, please?
Absolutely. Yes?
And on the department section up,
This is the department section.
there's one section up to section 1. Yeah. What am I supposed to write on the
Oh,
department?
you can just write like MBA or GBP or whatever. This is a form for our office, so like, as long as the degree completion and the signature is there from your advisor, I'm not gonna like throw you out. The top section is like, it's informational. And we're editing these forms to make them clearer, to make them, you know, fillable and, you know, editable, so it's really not a big deal. But in your case, you could put MBA or GBP. Yeah.
How many can you put the start?
60 days after your program end date. I recommend, okay, I'm like obsessed with this website. It was down for like 10 seconds a month ago and I started crying. I was so upset about it because I use this website so often. Okay, whatever. Here we go. This website's amazing because just like, I'm really bad at math, so, well, I'm not bad at math, I'm just bad at like calculations of dates, I guess. And so this lets you, boom, calculate it. You're a June 9th program end date, spring term. Your latest date would be August 8th, right? So it's just 60 days later. So you can just use like a date calculator to help with that.
What about the job visa? It can be unpaid.
So here's the sitch about jobs. You have to work at least 20 hours a week. You have to report it to our office because we got to get it in CVIS. Because if CVIS thinks you've gone over your unemployment because there's no employer listed, they will terminate your immigration record. And it needs to be related to your field. It doesn't have to be a full-time permanent job. It can be part-time, at least 20 hours a week. It could be short-term in duration. Maybe it's a 6-month internship. But unpaid positions are commonly not allowed because typically if you're doing productive work for a for-profit entity, they need to be paying you for it. And that's not necessarily immigration laws, that's labor laws. And so labor laws typically are such that it would be like the company's fault if they broke the law, right? But for the case of international students, it's actually unlawful for you to accept employment that violates labor laws. And so there's very, very, very limited circumstances where unpaid employment would be acceptable. If you have a specific example, we can talk about it. But our office has like a hardline stance on this, that like you should not be taking unpaid employment because you are all highly educated and really need to be compensated for the work that you're doing.
It's like, for example, for NGOs. Like,
yeah, for-profit and non-profit have kind of different rules and laws about what's acceptable. So we would have to like look at your specific example. But yeah, but by and large, it's not allowed. Yes?
I have 2 questions. So regarding what you said, like you can take like a part-time job, does it mean like only one part-time job? Or in that case, I can actually apply or get hired to like 2 or 3 different companies for a part-time job? Is that possible?
You can take as many companies as you want. Yeah, it's fine. You just need to report everything to us, right?
Okay.
So in our portal, you just need to report, and then in the notes you would say, this is my second job or whatever. Yeah.
And the second question is that when I get my card and the 90 days that I am employed during that period, can I go travel? Or I have to get like already like accepted by a company and then I can go travel?
So in the case that you're describing, you pick an OPT start date, let's say June 10th, and you get your card and June 10th comes and you don't have a job and you want to know, like, can I travel while I'm in the unemployment period? You can travel while you're in the unemployment period. However, the government can also ask you questions about what it is that you're doing when you try to enter the country, right? And so you need to have the words to describe what you've been doing. Because the unemployment period, the idea behind it is that you're looking for a job. But how can you be looking for a job in the US when you're hanging out in Cancun, right? So if you come back, you need to be able to explain, like, I have interviews, or I've applied for jobs, or I'm applying for jobs, or I'm in the unemployment period, so that they don't think that you like are just totally lost track of time. And then with regards to that, the scrutiny will increase as the unemployment period goes on. So if you're trying to enter like, you know, June 10th is your start date and you try to enter like June 15th or June 20th, they may not give you a hard time at all. But if you try to enter like in August, they're definitely going to be like asking much more questions because the time for you to find a job is slowly decreasing over time.
So
Yes.
how about if I got the card and it's still not the start date yet, but then during that period I go outside the country?
And that's not during the unemployment period, remember, that's just that's like the pre-start period basically, and that's totally fine. That's not a big deal at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And do we still have to mention end date? Because anyway, the end date will be determined by USCIS, right?
Yeah, so no, it's not, I mean, not really, but so typically in most cases we give people 12-month durations, right? But there are a couple of reasons why a person might want shorter than a 12-month duration. So remember we talked earlier about how you can only use OPT at each degree level one time. Well, there is one exception to that, and that is if you know that you're going to get 2 master's degrees or 2 bachelor's degrees or whatever, you might want to preserve some of your OPT at that degree level. So we had a student that did her master's degree in finance from NYU, and after that degree, she did 6 months of OPT. She only asked for 6 months because she knew she was going to get a master's degree in computer science, and she was preserving that OPT for her second master's degree, which she did her master's degree in computer science here, graduated, got 6 months of OPT, applied for STEM OPT off of the computer science degree, and is now working on STEM OPT for Bloomberg, making tons of money, being a total like computer money nerd, which is really awesome. And she's really cool. So yeah, so there are strategic reasons why you might want to preserve and not take an entire 12-month duration, but that would need to be settled out in a specific advising appointment with an advisor for sure. And that's, most people just take 12 months, and it's 365 days, so.
So for the degree completion form, is it okay if the end date is different than what we might decide in the advising session?
You can change the dates on the degree completion form, but remember the advising appointments are 20 minutes each, so we're not going to go 27 rounds about what your start and end dates are. I mean, if you like fill it out now and you pick June 10th and June 9th as your start and end dates, but then because of various delays you can't apply until, you know, a month later and you want to change it, that's fine, but just, you know, just don't take a lot of time in your advising if you're really concerned about start and end dates, you might want to come in for walk-in advising. Yeah.
In the delays and denials slide, you had CPT in the last quarter. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that's related to like delays, possible reasons for delays, and that is that if you're leaving, just make sure your name's on the form or you won't get my follow-up email. If you are doing CPT in your final quarter and you have a reduced course load in your final quarter, that's 3 different forms that your advisor is going to have to sign. Your reduced course load form, your cooperative agreement, and your OPT degree completion form. That's 3 different appointments with your advisor. That's 2 different appointments with our office. Some people find it logistically too difficult to manage all of those things at once. You just have to be organized. It's possible to do it, but keep in mind that the longer it takes you to get your cooperative agreement signed, the longer it'll take you to get a CPT appointment, the longer it'll take you to get an OPT appointment. And we definitely have people that are like, oh, I think I'm gonna get an internship in my final term, and then they're like, I don't know. And they're like waiting to see if they get an offer in their final term, and they like keep delaying until finally it's a month before they graduate and they haven't applied for OPT yet, and they've delayed their own OPT application by not, cutting the cord on CPT, right? So Gary always says, don't put all your eggs in a 10 weeks worth of CPT when you're looking down a year worth of OPT. It's more important that you apply for OPT than that you pursue CPT for 10 weeks, right? And so what I recommend with students about final term CPT is set in your mind your drop date where if you don't have your CPT authorized by that date, you are not going to pursue CPT and pursue OPT instead.
So what do you mean by prior I-20s? Slide visited the prior.
So every single person has already received at least one, if not multiple I-20s from Santa Clara and any other schools that they've attended. So if you have at least one from Santa Clara. If you've done CPT, you have more than one. If you have, if you've been issued the new version of the I-20 that doesn't have the barcode, you might have more than one. So everybody has I-20s.
That includes the transfer I-20 as well, right?
Yeah, if you transfer from another university, you're going to want to keep all of your I-20s. All of your I-20s that you've ever been given, because they're all part of your immigration record. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. More questions?
Tomorrow. What about dependents?
Yes. With regards to dependents, when we issue your new OPT I-20, we will also create I-20s for your dependents that show the OPT and show their continued maintenance of status and extension as well.
But you have to put their names or names in the application or something like that?
No. There's nothing about the dependents in the application, but we automatically create extension I-20s that show that they're allowed to keep staying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final date that it's in the card, it's like the final date you have to be out of the U.S.? Or
There's 60 days after that date.
60 days after.
Yeah. So basically, the question is like, when do I have to leave, right? So the answer to when you have to leave is either 90 days after the card is valid, plus 60 days, or the end of the card plus 60 days. So if you don't find a job within 90 days, your card becomes invalid and you have 60 days to leave.
60 days more.
Yes, after that. Or if you use your 12 months of OPT, then you have 60 days. Mm-hmm. More questions? No? We're good? All right.
In my case, that is
Yeah,
summer.
we need to touch base because I have some more information.